Christy, I am thrilled to have you on the Untangled Faith podcast. I really enjoyed your book, I enjoyed hearing your story. And what's so interesting, you probably could not have timed the sharing of your story with the Shiny Happy People docuseries that has become like one of the biggest things that Amazon has ever done. But I suppose it makes it easier to explain to people like, oh, if you aren't sure about my background, have you seen this?
That's kind of how the
Go watch
Duggars
it.
have been for me my whole entire life. As I've been trying to explain my story to people, I've always been like the Duggars, and they're like, oh yeah, yeah.
Yes, sort of. Yes, there's a Venn overlap, a Venn diagram overlap of your situation with
Hmm.
being connected with IBLP. Did you do the homeschool program or
Oh
did you
yeah, for 10
just,
years.
okay. All right. Well, so something must have happened in your life from doing the homeschool program for 10 years to writing a book about being a rebel, which is really anathema in the IBLP world. So tell us as much or as little of your story as you want to share.
Oh man. So yes, I did spend most of the 90s into the early 2000s in Bill Gothard's IBLTP program. And I went to a cultic church where everybody there was part of the IBLP program. And so it was very much a part of my life. My family itself was a bit of a rebel family. My dad was actually a public school teacher the whole time, which just doesn't make any sense. And you're kind of like,
So
what world are
crazy.
you living in? But because of that, I had one foot in the real world a little bit throughout the whole thing. And so we never got completely sucked into all of the Gothard stuff. But it was definitely a part of my life. The religious aspects were part of my life, the rules, the formulas, all of that stuff was a part of my life. And yeah, what happened? I met Jesus. So not even looking for him. I was the good girl following the rules,
You
trying.
thought you had already found Jesus.
I don't think I even cared.
Okay.
Be honest. Like it was one of those like I'm just doing the right thing and God is I believe in God, I'm believing the Bible, I'm following the rules kind of a thing. It never really occurred to me that he was like real.
Hmm.
He was just the name on a page of an old book, and he was just a concept, he was an idea that I believed in.
Hmm.
And I mean I didn't remember a time when I didn't believe in him kind of a thing. But yeah, he became real when I was 15 and that changed everything. That changed absolutely everything. And I think that meeting him like that in such a real way is why I'm still a Christian after
Yeah.
everything that we've been through. That's it.
I just interviewed Karen Swallow Prior, who is an absolute genius. And she has a book coming out about the evangelical imagination. And just the argument there is like how much we have been shaped. Our faith has been shaped. The way we live our faith has been shaped by culture. And the culture of IBLP has really like got its tentacles all
Oh,
over American evangelicalism. So that is fascinating to me that you say it was finding Jesus
yeah. Oh, yeah.
that
Because,
opened up your eyes.
at 15, I was doing my good girl thing. I was actually praying a list of God's names back to him. So, like his Hebrew names and just like this whole thing of like who he was, praying it back to him. Like I was supposed to, it was a homeschool program. It was actually like an assignment from IBLP. Here, pray this list of names. And so I was doing it and just suddenly realized that there was an unexplicable presence there with me in the room. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. And I was not looking for it. I was not looking for him, but he was looking for me.
Yeah.
And, just finding him like that, I was like, okay, if God's real, like a real person, I want to know him.
Yeah.
And so it was pursuing that in my prayer time, in my scripture reading by myself, like actually in context, not like IBLP does it or other
Yeah.
religious Christianity does it. And that just like, that's what turned me into rebel. It was like this Jesus that I know is not the same Jesus that they're telling me about.
Yeah.
Like they don't line up. And so, yeah, that's what it is.
In your book, you talk about a point in your like young adult life, and
Mhm.
you're still young adult. I would say you're on the
I think
younger
I look
side.
younger than I really am.
Well, we're gonna just own that right now. We're gonna name it and claim it right now. That there came a point for you when you realized, oh my goodness, that wasn't just a little weird.
Yeah.
This sounds like a cult, and discovering that the harm that it did. I mean, you knew how it sort of messed up your view of
Yeah.
theology,
Yeah.
but finding the Facebook group of people that had been really hurt um, by the Gothard way and actually being at headquarters and all the things involved in that.
Mhm.
Like, what was that experience like for you to sort of grapple with? This wasn't just a little weird. This was like really, really bad.
It's funny because I had been telling my family for years that it was a cult. I had been telling them for years that Gothard was crazy, that he was wrong, that he was bad. I had an interaction with him, probably early 20s, where I'd actually met him face to face for the first time. And I was already a little rebellious in my heart. And so I was like, he always talks about like your bright, shiny eyes, and eyes are the window of the soul. Like, I'm going to look into his eyes and find out what I see, kind of a thing. I was not the kind of girl he wanted to be with in headquarters. Like, I was like, and so I remember doing that, like just giving him like a real look as I shook his hand and said hi, and just feeling like this is just darkness in
Yeah.
here. And that was kind of like really, so it's something I'd already been talking about, like this is wrong, but no one ever believed me. And my parents kind of were like, you need to just relax and not be so judgmental and stuff like that. And I was like, no. And so I think really discovering that other people also thought it was a cult, and really discovering recoveringgrace.com was huge for me, because it had all the stories of people who had been at the headquarters or at the different training centers and stuff like that. And so just seeing that, I was like, oh yeah, I was right. Like, this is really bad. Like, this is really, really bad. And it was weird because I'd never really talked about that. I'd never really dealt with it. I just kind of closed the door and moved on to try to be normal, try to, engage in the normal world. And so actually dealing with that was very strange. It was very hard, and just a lot of stuff I had to actually talk about. And this was probably like, 10 years ago. And so I'm finally dealing with it for the first time 10 years ago, and just really wrestling with how much it was affecting my marriage and my kids and just my view of God, and how many things I thought I had moved past, and yet they were
Yeah.
still there. Like the tentacles were just entwined still. And it was a lot. It was a lot. And not everybody wanted to hear the stories.
Yeah. I
Not
mean, it
everybody
was a
wanted to
different
know. Yeah.
environment there. Social media didn't exist like it exists now. Facebook was newish around that time, and it was just a really concentrated pockets of conversation happening, like in like one or two places. It wasn't
Exactly.
everywhere. And I also understand, like, it was hard for our parents to hear and reckon with the idea
Yes.
that something that they had chosen, uh, even if they weren't wholeheartedly endorsing everything,
Yep.
was harmful. And man, I have empathy for the parents, but I have so much respect for the ones that have said, it's hard to hear, but I know I would do something different. I would make a different decision today.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I,
And that's
I
where my
just,
parents are
I
now. Like
wish I had done something
it
different.
took like 10 years to get them to that place, because at first they were really like just very resistant to me talking about it, even when I was starting to blog about it,
Yeah.
like very resistant. But they've really come to the place where they're recognizing like that was wrong, that was bad. And now that my book is out and I'm actually just, talking about it. My mom told me just the other day, she's like, I really just was struggling. Why would God have let us get into this in the first place? She's like, I prayed about it. I
Yeah.
prayed about getting into it. And, he let us get into it. And so how do I reconcile that with the fact that now I know about it, and it really was this terrible situation, terrible things were happening, it's so twisted. And I remember telling her, just, it's okay, mom. Like, that's part of the story. It's part of my story. Now I
Yeah.
can share this with other people. And, we can't always understand what God's doing and why he
Yeah.
allows things, but like, it's okay. It's okay. So
And
yeah.
in talking with different people, their ability to reckon with things and find different levels of healing really does seem connected in some ways to how, I mean, now I'm not blaming parents, but it does feel like there is
Oh,
a real difference in those that are able to like find like make sense of it more and to find
yes.
more healing
Yes.
and be less likely to just ditch everything when the parents are at least willing to entertain the conversation. The
Yeah. And
parents that
I
haven't been
think it's
willing to have
also
any conversation, I think it's really hard. I mean, it's harder for those, especially as you're growing into adulthood and you're like, I have some questions about this.
right. And
Yeah,
I think it's a different kind of parent. Like what
yeah,
I've noticed with the IBLP stuff, and even just, I mean, I don't think it's just Gothard. There is so much just religious Christianity out there it's hard to blame Gothard for everything. But I think when you have parents who are somewhat healthy, and are trying their best and are
Yeah.
trying to build relationships, like a whole different scenario than when you have somebody who is mentally ill and who is just sucked into this and using this as an excuse for their behaviors, as an excuse for the things that they're doing. And they're already a broken person who's really struggling. And so I think that is a difference. And I had parents who, yes, got sucked into a cult,
Yeah.
but were healthy. And I think that that is partly why I was able to really be able to just deal with this, like you said.
Yeah. You said you had one foot in the real world still the
Mm-hmm.
whole time. So you saw from early on that people that claim to act in the name of Jesus aren't always. People that are leaders, people that people look up to and should be standard
Yeah.
bearers, make bad decisions. And so I see in your book something really lovely. And it is this being willing to see the truth of how broken some of this is and how that has informed your empathy for people that have feel really like skeptical and guarded about their faith experience.
Mm-hmm.
And like I had written down what you said. I think it was even in the introduction. You said, "We are disillusioned because we have found a fake substitute. Our cranky hearts are leading us home." So many people are like, "Why are you cranky? Cranky is bad." Um, Tell me why it's okay. Tell me why you're giving us permission to be cranky. I love it.
uh, I think this is just the core of my heart for people and the core of every message that I share, whether it's in a book or a podcast or a blog or social media. It's like I just want so badly for everybody to meet Jesus, like the real Jesus. But we have so twisted him, and we're so good at misrepresenting God and misunderstanding God, and we're so good at being religious as people. Like we want to do the things that make God happy and follow the steps. And I just want people to recognize like the fact that you are disillusioned and the fact that you are cranky probably means you haven't actually met Jesus. And so I would like you to be cranky and I would like you to be disillusioned because that God that you found is a fake and
Yeah.
he's not real. And it's okay to reject him. And it's okay to abandon those ideas in the search for a very real God that I can't explain to you like why I know he exists, but I just know. I mean, between the Bible, between my own experiences of him, between just, I mean, yeah, I know he's real. And
Yeah.
I want everybody to meet him. Like I want everybody to have that reconciliation with the God who made them. And so I want you to be cranky. I'm excited when people tell me like, I think I'm losing my faith. I'm like, good.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? And I'm like, no, this is the place where we meet Jesus. This is the place where we actually encounter him when we're willing to say that religious junk is not really God. And I want to find him. Like he is going to find you. If you're looking for him, you will find him.
Yeah. That stood out to me, Christy, is one of the hallmarks of really legalistic faith communities is this a lot of fences up and a lot of don't go there. It's a
Yep.
slippery slope. Um, don't ask too many
Yep.
questions. Uh, what would you say to the person that has been told? If you ask too many questions, this is dangerous. It's a slippery slope. And I also wonder if maybe people are afraid that it's all just a house of cards, and if they
Yeah.
ask too many questions, they'll realize that there's just nothing left.
Right. And I think that is a fear. And I think that's an underlying fear of the religious people in those religious systems, even if they're not acknowledging it,
Yeah.
is like, if we start questioning this, well, then people are going to lose their faith. And I'm like, well, what are they going to lose their faith in? There's this kids movie. Like your listeners, you guys should find this movie. I can't remember what it's called, but it's about this Yeti. And it's this like, it's amazing because it's so all about this. But these Yetis are living on this mountain and they're not supposed to ask questions. And the stones tell them all the stories of the Yetis and all this kind of stuff. And people are fake. But then they find a person and all their things start unraveling. It's such a good story. So go find it. It's about Yetis. And the same idea here is if I question, if I doubt, what if everything falls apart? And I think that for me, like I look at the difference between historical creeds of the faith, things that people have believed for 2,000 years, things that you're going to find in every denomination, whether it's a higher order denomination or evangelical denomination, like you're going to find these same cores of the faith throughout the entire thing. And people have been believing these and staking their lives on them for thousands of years. Those to me are like the things that you can find and hold on to and say, you know what, this must be true because people have been doing this for so long. But then we have all this other junk. And I talk about it in my book with this Lego illustration of
Yes, I love that.
deconstruction. And it's like, we have to just take it apart. Like we have to take it apart because we have added so much junk to the cores of the faith, to God, to Jesus. Our Western understanding of how we read the Bible is just ridiculous. We read it like it was written to us in the 21st century in English, literally, and we take it out of context and we don't understand what it's really talking about. And so there's tons of stuff that we have to take apart. Like we have to take it apart. And so, like, I forgot your initial
You're not
question.
afraid though. What you're saying, you're not afraid of, like, ask the questions.
No, ask the questions.
It'll
Ask
be
the
all right.
questions. Let the things unravel that need to unravel. And sometimes, I mean, I have people tell me, like, what if I become an atheist? And I was like, so what? Become an atheist if you need to. If Jesus is real, he'll find you again.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's, I mean, to me, it's like, it's okay. Like if you have to let all of that go because your understanding of who God is so, just distorted, and you still want to find Jesus and you're still curious about it, like you'll find him again. He's real enough and he's
If
big
he's
enough to handle your
real,
questions.
yeah, you said it. If he's real and he wants to be found, he will be.
Yeah, he will be. Yeah.
What's the worst thing that can happen?
Right. Exactly.
And for some people, that's a crazy, scary question. But I love how you aren't afraid. You're not afraid of the word deconstruction.
Mm-mm.
You'd probably tell people, don't worry if Sally says, I'm deconstructing.
Oh yeah. Like I wrote a whole blog post to people who, like, basically to parents who are like, it's basically this idea of like when someone you love deconstructs their faith, because people get so worried about that. And I think so much of the Christian community has misunderstood what deconstruction is.
Yeah.
And then you have more of the progressive Christians that want it to mean a certain thing. And then you've got other people saying, well, if you deconstruct, that means you're going to deconvert and you're going to go, past it. No, like you're just taking it apart.
Yeah.
Like take it apart and then put it back together again. Leave out all the stuff that's extra and put those pieces back together and figure out what it is that I actually believe. And I think the thing that really has encouraged me over the last few years is I've deconstructed and reconstructed yet again, probably 4 times now. It's just,
it'll happen again.
Yeah, not a big deal. But the thing that's encouraged me is the things that I'm standing on right now, I now have this huge body of believers that I agree with. And so you're not in this narrow place where you're like, well, we're right and everybody else is wrong. But like the things that I'm holding on to, I now have brothers and sisters across every denomination, across all the countries, across the continents, and so it's like we are connected because we believe in Jesus. And you're like, it's those few things that we really need to hold on to, and everything else can just, who cares if we end up at something that we don't agree on? It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, deconstruction. I'm not afraid of deconstruction. I welcome deconstruction. Like, I think it's a beautiful thing. I think it's something God's doing. And I think that he's on the other side of it as we reconstruct as well. Like, I am not afraid of this at all. I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. You share in one of your chapters how there was a time where some of these popular books were coming out from people that were really like taking a look at their faith and how their experience in the evangelical world had formed them, and how initially you were like, what is wrong with these people? Like, I experienced some bad things. I'm fine.
Yeah, that was like,
you had some more real life things happen that made you think, okay, I want to listen to what they have to say. Yeah. Tell us about that experience for you.
Yeah. So, after I left IBLP and I went to college and I dated and married my opposite husband, and we went to Bible school and we were going to go into ministry. And I thought I had left most of my religious legalistic ideas behind. I was doing really well at being this, normal Christian person. And it was in that season when he was a youth pastor and I was his wife and had 2 kids, and these books came out and I was just like, this is terrible. Like, why are people leaving their faith? Why are they questioning their faith? But I hadn't really experienced any kind of Christian hurt, trauma, spiritual abuse kind of thing outside of the cult. And so it was like, I could look at the cult and then be like, but I'm fine now. And then we went through spiritual abuse and religious trauma at the church that we were pastoring at. And after a year that was like from hell, we ended up being told we had to leave. And it wasn't like we had done anything. It was just a conflict, abusive leadership. It was all the things that you read about, all the stories that you hear about all the time,
Yeah.
it's like they have a little checklist of how to do it because everything happened to us. And it was beyond devastating. Like it was the hardest thing I've ever been through.
Yeah.
And it completely broke me. Like if I didn't know Jesus for myself, I would probably have left my faith
Yeah. You expected better
because
of them. You expected a cult to be a cult. Cults do culty things.
yes. And I
Cults will
expected
be
church people
unhealthy,
to
they
be
will
healthy.
harm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was so, so devastating. But in that place of brokenness, I actually read the books. I'd never read them before. I just condemned
Yeah.
them, read them and realized, gosh, I get this now.
Yeah.
Like, I get why you would want to be done with this. I get why you would walk away from this. And yeah, I mean, it was the hardest thing that ever happened to me. It was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me because I feel like that is what just broke me, humbled me, made me the gracious person who's like, yeah, I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I'm not going to judge you because I've been there. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think that loosens some of those hidden tentacles of
oh
legalism that we don't realize are still there,
yeah,
where we're like, "Oh, yeah, I let go of some of these other things, but I assumed that there were other things beyond the creeds that made somebody actually okay
yep,
with Jesus," right?
yep,
Where
yep, and yeah,
I feel more comfortable now too, now that life has just felt so much more broken, experienced more of it to be like, I talk about sitting at the literal or metaphorical church potluck. I want to
mm-hmm.
sit by that person that's experienced the hard thing because they're more likely to not say something stupid. They're more likely to understand things are more complicated
Yeah,
than you think they are. And when you're going through something really hard, that's the person I wanna sit next to while they're eating their banana pudding and the whatever other casserole that Mary always brings. I wanna sit by them.
yeah,
Um, and I too found that, like, some people that I was sort of afraid to even entertain what they had to say, I was like, "You know what? I'm not afraid of what they have to say anymore because the truth stands. The
yeah,
truth holds up." And And I honestly believe in the end, some of these people that I have some different theology with, that we still agree on some of these like creedal things,
mm-hmm.
we're gonna be with Jesus together. And uh and so I just thought that I love that your heart softened in a way that
Yeah,
made you say, all right, there's something here. There's
yeah.
something here.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because I didn't necessarily agree with them still. Like, the at the end of the book, I was like, okay, I still like I get that, but but it was okay because I was able to be like, okay, I hear your story. I hear where you're coming from. I get this. And the potluck thing you're talking about, I think the people who have been through the hard things, they also know that you don't have to say anything.
Yeah.
Like you can just sit there and listen to this person share with you and be like, mm-hmm, you're not crazy. Mm-hmm. I gotcha. Like, yep. And just to have somebody acknowledge you and like understand your story, understand your pain, understand your questions, like it's a beautiful thing to have somebody who can just be like, yep, you're okay.
Yeah.
Because we're so quick to judge as Christians and we're so quick, and it's out of fear. I
Yeah.
think that so much of the mess that we're in right now and so much of this just spiritual abuse and religious trauma is people that do it come from a place of fear.
Yeah.
Like it's fear.
You said that you have become comfortable with not having the answers.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating to me because the legalistic world is very much about you must have an answer for
Oh
everything,
yeah.
and this is what the answer is.
Yep.
And there is a specific answer for everything, even the things you're like, really? Is there? So tell me about what's it like? How did you come to that point of like being comfortable not having the answers?
Being broken.
Real life.
I was very condemned in the whole church thing that went down. And so I found myself just very like I feel like the woman who was caught in adultery. Like not that I was actually caught in adultery, but I feel that same level of shame and condemnation and just being left in the dust and knowing that Jesus like chose to get down there in the dust with me. And like, that was amazing. And so just feeling that just acceptance from him, that love from him, that even in the middle of this thing where everybody else thought I was so wrong, even though I knew I wasn't wrong, that was just, I guess that just grace that I'd never experienced before, the grace of God, the true grace of God. And I started to recognize like it didn't matter if I was right or wrong, if they were right or wrong. And so I think that's where it started, was that
Yeah.
place of just brokenness. And then recognizing how many of my beliefs have changed over the years and continue to change
Yeah.
as you explore things, as you explore concepts. And there's some things that I've come down to and be like, no, I still don't agree with that.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thought, but no, I just don't see that in scripture. I don't see it over the arching themes of scripture. I don't want to just take one little piece of this. I want to look at the whole overarching themes, and maybe that'll change someday. And
Yeah.
I'm okay with that place of being like, this might change, but for now, this is what I believe. But that doesn't mean I have to hate you or be upset with you because you have a different thing. I can just listen to you and be, okay, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Okay, well, this is what I think. Okay. And just to be at that place where you're like, yeah, it doesn't really matter. Am I right or am I wrong about this? I don't know. Like, these are my beliefs that I'm holding right now, and I can be confident in those at the same time, recognizing that I might change them
Yeah.
next year if there's better evidence.
Yeah. I look at my own kids and I think, man, they are not moved by the stereotypical apologetics of the 80s and 90s and even early 2000s. Like, here are all of the arguments for you about why God exists and all the things. And I think part of that is they have seen an inability of some of these same apologists to like really grapple in good faith with science or other things. And so I think it will be interesting to see how things move forward. And I think I am erring more on the side also of like, I just don't feel like a good argument really ever changed someone's heart anyways. Uh, I'm not a good arguer. I'm not a good debater. And we have seen such disappointing behavior from some of the highest profile apologists. I
Yeah.
think of like Ravi Zacharias, and I
Yeah.
wonder, did he even believe a thing he said? And he was lifted up as like one of the most gifted
I know. I
apologists.
know.
And I think if we are basing our faith on arguments, it, I just don't see it going anywhere. I mean, not that there is, I think there should be like rational arguments that are
Oh,
made,
yeah.
but I think we get too tied up in it. Like that
Oh,
isn't
yeah.
the thing that's going to hold somebody's faith.
Well, it's like
Yeah.
Apostle Paul talked about that, though, when he talked about, knowledge puffs up
Yeah.
and love builds up. And so I think it's all of these things that we're running into right now. I don't feel like they're any different than humanity has been over the entire, like people are always into the things that
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
whether it's genealogies or whether it's your apologetics or whatever it is, you're always into these things that we know and these arguments. And the other day, I just remembered this story about what happened when I was younger, and I was probably 21, maybe. So just right on the edge of still being in the cult, but kind of getting out of it. Definitely had met Jesus, had this super real relationship with him. And I was going on this ski trip with these people, and they were going to pick me up and take me on this ski trip for the weekend, and family friends, but they had this extra kid that was coming with them that was a friend of their cousins from out of town. I don't know. But he was in college, and I should have been in college, but I wasn't because I was in a cult. And so I remember getting in the back of the car with him, and he's like, "Hi, I'm so and so. I'm a philosophy major." And within a few minutes, he's like, "I can convince you that God's not real." And I was like, "No, you can't." And he goes, "Yes, I can." And I was like, "No, you can't." We had this awkward like thing back and forth. And finally he's like, "Why? Why can't I?" And I was like, "Because I've met him." And I remember he just looked at me and was like, "Oh." Like he didn't really know what to say to that one. But I think that's, you can have your beliefs and why you have those beliefs. But I think the heart of it comes back to just our hearts as people. Like we need Jesus. Like we need God. We need that relationship that we were created to be in, to be restored into, so that we can be restored into the person that he created us to be. And so I think that's just at the heart of everything. And that's what we need. We need that life-changing, actual living relationship with God, which is possible.
And an acknowledgement that it isn't just a rational argument.
No. Yep.
And and that sounds ridiculous to some people, but I mean, if we're gonna be intellectually honest, we can just say at some point, I can't really totally argue away all of people's argument,
Yep.
questions. And it's okay. Because some of this is faith. And if somebody isn't okay with that, it's all right. Like
Yeah.
if we feel secure in our
That's right.
attachment to Jesus, it should not be shaken by other people like not following the rules or if we don't have the right words to say. I mean, I think it just created a really insecure
Hmm.
relationship, a faith relationship when everything was based on having to do all the things and know all the things. Because in the end, then it's really about what we do. It's not about Jesus'
Exactly.
work. Jesus' work isn't enough.
Right.
We had to do all the other things. So tell me about how this has informed your parenting. Like, you have to think like, I love Jesus. I want to raise my kids to understand, like,
Yeah.
not get in the way of who the real Jesus is and like step away from the legalism that
Yeah.
you were given as you were growing up. What's it been like?
It's been interesting because I think, if anything, I probably err on the side of like not doing enough spiritual formation with them because I don't want it to be about spiritual formation.
Yeah.
And so it's been a journey, but it's been fun to just kind of watch. I shared the gospel with my kids from the time they were tiny. Just the idea of like, God wants to have a relationship with us, and we broke the relationship, but Jesus fixed it for us, kind of a thing, and just a very simple gospel. Just look at what Jesus did for us. Look how much He loves us, and never asked them to pray a prayer or do anything like that. Just shared that gospel. And it's been fun to watch them. They're 11 and almost 13 now, to build their own faith,
Yeah.
like to kind of build their own relationship with God. And I do believe that both of them have encountered Him in some way and put their faith in Him and put the trust in Him, whatever that Christianese terminology means. It's so silly. And so that's been interesting.
Yeah.
I'm definitely like, I want them to have a relationship with God, but I want it to be organic. I want it to be their idea. And so the other day, my son, who's 11, came and he's like, I don't feel like I'm reading the Bible as much as I'd like to be. And I was like, okay, well, what do you think that should look like? And he's like, I don't know. And I was like, he's like, I have a Bible. Like I said, yeah, you could. Do you have a journal? Do you have a notebook you could write some prayers down in or something like that? He's like, oh yeah, I could. And so it just, because he was interested in it, I helped him to kind of look, what might that look like? Well, it could look like this if you wanted it to.
Yeah.
We just kind of talked about it, and if that's something he wants to do, great. If it's something he doesn't want to do, I'm not going to make him do it because I don't want him to think that doing that makes you better with God, or doing that makes you a better Christian. Like, if you want to get to know God, go for it. If you don't, that's
So
fine. You're 11.
lies in faith. Parenting is one of those things where you say you don't believe in like the prosperity gospel, or I don't want to be like in legalism and all these things.
Right.
And then you have kids and you're like, oh my goodness.
Oh, I know.
I
I
just
know
want
the
a
things that
book.
I've the,
I just want a book that tells me what to do.
I
I
know.
want a guarantee that if I do XYZ, ABC will happen. I
Yeah.
want it. And like, so I can say with my words and know in my brain, like that is not how it works. And I will reassure parents every day, all day that like, hey, it's out of your hands. Like, we will do the
Right.
best we can. But, like, then my own emotions and my own like, and then I just kind of want to bite a a pillow in my room, be like, but what
Yep.
if there was? Could there please be some guarantee? Because it is scary. It is
It is.
hard
And it's
to
hard.
be
Like,
like,
even,
if I just model it, that's all I have to do. I mean, that mean I can't force anything.
yeah, I know. Well, and even just like, with the purity culture that I was raised in, it's like, okay, how do I do my 13-year-old girl as she's getting older? Like, how do I don't want to go too far to this side and be like, no, we're going to let you do, but I also don't want to be like, so it's been a challenge. And just the other night we had a conversation. She was like, I don't want to be like so-and-so. I don't like what they're doing, da 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 kind of thing. And she's like, but I think I'm kind of like that. And so, but we just talked about, okay, so it's one thing to try to control your behaviors. I said, but I want you to dig deep in your heart, ask the Holy Spirit to help you. Just be like, why am I doing this? Why do I want to be right all the time? Why do I have a hard time being wrong? What is it about that? It's security, you feel like you're not good enough, and really just dig in there with him. I said, I don't want you to just try to change your behaviors because that's not where it's at. And so those kind of conversations, how do you
Oh,
have those kinds of
right there.
conversations?
I want your heart to be right, and I want you to do the right
I
thing.
know. So it's like, how do how do you trust that the Holy Spirit is strong enough to,
Yeah.
and I want to give him the opportunity to do that and not be the person. But it's hard. It's hard, especially because you're like looking back, even just watching Shiny Happy People. I was looking back at my early parenting and my husband and I was like, he's like, oh, that's where that came from. And I was like, I don't want to talk about it. But
Yes, it was.
just,
I
yes,
read
it
the book.
was. Yep.
I like
So,
remember reading Shepherding a Child's
yeah.
Heart and telling my mom about it. And she's like, are you sure? Because it was
Yep.
like, you just keep spanking that kid until
I
they are
know.
like happy and thanking you. And I'm like, but it said that in the book. And she's
I
like,
know.
are you sure?
I know.
And now I'm just like, wow, that was so awful. So, I mean, well meaning,
Right.
but wrong.
Right. Right. Oh,
And
I know.
if we hold things loosely and be like, remember all the well meaning but wrong things that have happened in the past, there's a
Mm-hmm.
likelihood that isn't completely done. And there are
Right.
things that I don't know that I'm going to have to later on be like, I messed that up. I think holding things loosely is like the key. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously Jesus is the answer to everything, the Sunday school answer. But like being willing to say, I could be wrong.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And to say that
I could be wrong.
I was wrong. Yeah, I guess I've just as I've kind of seen that the laws, the legalistic laws that I was a part of that we thought were right, were so wrong, and
Yeah.
just recognizing like that was never God's intent. So yeah, I mean, it has been a journey, and I'm probably not done yet. So, but I'm not going to write it off either. I'm not the people
I
who are
think
like,
it's a
right,
good
cut that part out.
perspective.
I'm just going to
I'm
get
not
rid of
done
that.
yet.
Yeah.
And nobody was able to live up to the law, like the law. And that's sort of the point of
It's
like,
sort of the point.
we needed Jesus. We needed Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think people that really struggle, a lot of times they have seen people use out of context
Oh
some of
yeah.
these like complicated things and been like, here's the rule. You cannot
Yep.
wear leather.
Yep. Exactly.
You
And
can't eat
it's
this one thing. You can't
yes.
wear earrings. You
Yep.
can't well, there's like a bigger context to the whole thing.
Exactly.
And when somebody uses it for their own power
Yes.
and they're to like
Yes.
wield it in a way that is shameful and to like give themselves prop themselves up, it's always going to end up bad.
Always.
And so I have empathy for people that are like, I don't want to hear that. I
Yeah.
don't want to hear
And
that.
I'm totally fine. Like if people need a break from that, take a break.
Yeah, I'm not
No,
worried about it.
take
I am
a break.
not
I'm
worried
not worried
about
about it, but I'm also going
arguing
to tell
people into
exactly.
yeah.
No, I'm like, take a break, but I'm also going to encourage them, don't just write it off.
Yeah.
Like if there comes a point in time when you can say, I'm going to revisit this, I'm going to circle back to this. It's been long enough that I can learn a little bit of something, like actually dig in from a cultural perspective, learn it from somebody who actually knows what they're talking about versus some legalistic person who's taking it in the King James and telling you whatever, whatever it means. So,
Yeah.
but if you need to take a break, take a break. Just, I think the thing I still struggle with is like, I get it. I understand why, but I do still struggle with the idea of like, I don't get this. I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable. So I'm
Yeah.
just going to throw that out and decide that, God isn't, that's not God. That's not the Bible. That's not, and I'm like, well, can we just take a minute to try to understand it first before you decide that it's just wrong? Like,
I was talking with Caitlin Chess recently. She has a book coming out called The Ballot in the Bible, how Americans have used and abused scripture in politics from
mm-hmm,
the beginning.
mm-hmm,
And she talked about we should pay attention to those verses that we
mm-hmm.
tend to want to ignore.
Yeah.
There's certain things that we're like, oh, I like this one. I'm going to camp here. But like, why are these ones? Why do we feel weird about it? And maybe there's a reason. And to like lean into it and to learn more about it,
Yep.
do more introspection. And it should never end in a feeling of shame, but a feeling
No.
of like the Holy Spirit works and transforms us.
Yeah.
Um, I like what she said there, even though like that feels like, oh, I can't just like ignore the thing that I don't wanna. But we get into all sorts of trouble when we cherry pick.
Oh,
And I mean,
yes.
that happens in legalism all the time where you're
Yes.
like, we're never gonna talk about Galatians, but we are for sure gonna talk about how if you don't cry out loud enough, then you may be at fault for your assault.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Which so as we wrap up, I want you to tell me maybe just a handful of rebellious things that you do now that would be just anathema
Oh,
to your IBLP cohort
oh
of
my gosh.
like your younger. This is where you tell us the secrets of
Yeah, no,
how
I mean,
terribly rebellious you are. Tell me you play cards.
oh, absolutely.
Was that against the rules?
I don't not that wasn't in our like fundamental no, because we played euchre. We played euchre
Oh,
back then.
okay,
So that wasn't a thing. But I think back to my 16-year-old self and I'm like, if she could look forward to me, I would be so mortified by who I turned into. I mean, I have short hair. I have a cartilage piercing.
girl.
I only have two children. I'm a working mother. I wear pants. I listen to all kinds of music. I drink alcohol. I mean, like the list
Girl,
goes on
we will
and
be praying
on
for you.
and on of all the things that I do. I've
I'm
learned to
noticing
be.
the eye trap of dangly earrings
Oh yeah, there you go.
happening.
There's that. Yeah, I mean, I show more than just my collarbone sometimes. Um, and I think
Women have collarbones?
it's awful. I mean, I'm wearing a
Not
tank
supposed
top
to
right now.
let people know that.
But I think the thing that would make me the most upset is that I have just embraced my strength. I am okay with being a strong woman. I'm okay with being somebody who has leadership skills. I'm okay with talking to men and teaching them and, all of that kind of stuff. That would probably be one of the most horrible things is that I just no longer trying to keep this under wraps. No longer trying to like, hello, my name is Christy. No, I'm okay with just
Whatever
being
you
who I
say, I
exactly.
will not speak. You will speak. You are the
That
man.
I've just embraced that strong personality and said, this is who I am and I have these gifts and I'm going to go ahead and go for it. And so, yeah, horribly rebellious, horribly, horribly rebellious.
I like this version. I like this
Thanks.
version of Christy. I would have
I,
I have so much empathy for version 1.0, but thank the Lord that he does not leave us at version 1.0.
yes, or even 2.0.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
this might be more like 3.0 at this point.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate this conversation. This has been
Oh,
really fun.
thank
I know
you.
my
Thanks for having
listeners
me. I
will
appreciate
be
it.
very excited to hear from you. Is your book out in the world already, or is
It
it coming
is.
out?
Oh,
Okay.
it's out. It's on
Where do we
Amazon.
find it? Okay.
You can buy it on Amazon or barnesandnobles.com, walmart.com, or if you'd like an autographed copy, you can purchase it from my website and I will send it to you autographed.
Fantastic. I'll put a link to that in the show
Perfect.
notes.